glued to their screens, Nigel Farage took Julia Hartley-Brewer to task, delivering a verbal masterclass that left the seasoned broadcaster momentarily lost for words. Farage, known for his sharp wit and unapologetic stance on immigration, dismantled the Labour government's approach to the Channel crossings crisis, highlighting their inability to stem the tide of over 20,000 migrants since July. As he passionately argued for deportation as the only effective deterrent.
In what has become a trademark move, Nigel Farage took down a foolish BBC host live on TV, leaving her completely speechless. He delivered a verbal masterclass that left the seasoned host lost for a few minutes on air. Farage, known for his sharp criticism and unapologetic stands on immigration, delivered a scathing assessment of the Labour government's approach to the Channel crossing crisis. He highlighted their inability to handle the case of over 300,000 immigrants since July. As he passionately argued for deportation as the only effective means of handling the crisis, Farage turned his sights on the European Convention on Human Rights, accusing it of tying the hands of the UK and calling out the government for their reluctance to act. But what did the Reform Party leader say that left a seasoned journalist, an experienced TV host, momentarily stunned? Ensure you watch this video till the end as we take you through this epic showdown and verbal masterclass by the MP.
Confirmation that we have seen more than 20,000 Channel migrants crossing on small boats since July the 5th when Keir Starmer took over as Prime Minister. He said he was going to smash the gangs, he was going to get on top of this, abandon the Rwanda policy. We know that more people come in the summer months than come in winter months. So is this to be expected, or do you think that actually this is a big Labour fail?
Well, what's interesting isn't just the 20,000 number, 20,000 nearly all young men who come from completely different cultures and many of whom will go straight into criminality.
Nigel Farage has once again delivered a scattering criticism of both the Labour Party and the Conservatives. In this latest interview, he zeroed in on the failure of both parties to address the issue of illegal migration into the UK, which he described as a national security problem.
In this country is a change of culture. We are living in societal decline when nobody has the moral courage to stand up and do what is right for fear of being called names. The fact that the so-called grooming scandal, or should we call it the mass rape abomination?
With over 20,000 migrants crossing the English Channel since July alone, Farage highlights these numbers as a vivid example of the Labour Party's failure to manage the borders. Although the Labour Party bears most of his displeasure, he didn't leave out the Conservatives. He pointed out the underlined issues have been festering under successive Conservative administrations. Farage's statement comes after a shocking number was revealed about immigration into the UK. More than 500,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel in small boats since records began. The milestone was reached after 407 people made the dangerous journey from France on Boxing Day and 451 arrived on Christmas Day. It means that 1,502,4,3 migrants have travelled to the UK on rubber dinghies since the start of 2018, the equivalent of a town the size of Blackpool. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage said, "This number is not only a disgrace, but poses a genuine threat to national security."
Blenheim Palace, not only a magnificent place and a wonderful place to come and visit, but of course the birthplace of Winston Churchill, who represented something when this country was indeed a great country, not just in terms of looking after its own people, but in standing up for the right things in the world. And I look back on 2024, a year that started with me in almost semi-retirement, not involved in active politics, approaching my 60th birthday.
Interestingly, Starmer has pledged to crack down on the crossings after his election win returned Labour to government after 14 years in opposition. Upon entering office, he scrapped the previous Conservative government's controversial scheme to send irregular migrants to Rwanda, branding it a gimmick. The latest figures mean last year had the second highest number of annual arrivals since data on the crossings began to be collected in 2018. A breakdown of the numbers shows that in the first 9 months of 2024, Afghan migrants accounted for the single largest group of arrivals, making up 17% of the total. People from Vietnam, Iran, and Syria were the next largest groups. Vietnamese migrants appeared to fuel the surge in crossings in 2024. They made up just 5% of arrivals in 2023, well below the January-September 2024 figure of 13%.
Calais making £800,000 per year out of human trafficking, and so long as there's no feasible way of them being returned to any country, Sir Keir Starmer has said that he will scrap Rwanda on day one. Kevin Saunders, this will only continue.
It will, yes, it will continue. It really will continue. And I think it's very, very important that you people in the media actually tell the people, the electorate, that at the moment we cannot remove people to their countries of origin, because to remove somebody, you have to have a document. Now, Sir Keir was saying that he was going to speed up all the applications and remove people that had no right to be in the UK. Well, I'm very sorry, he can't.
At least 76 deaths were recorded in about 20 accidents last year, making it the deadliest year for migrants who are taking ever greater risks to evade Britain's border control. According to reports from French officials, at least 5,800 people were rescued at sea last year, and authorities prevented more than 870 attempted crossings.
This is all back in the news. I don't know whether you've read online some of the accounts of what happened to girls as young as 11, 12 and 13 years old. If you haven't read the transcripts online, I advise you not to, because you frankly won't be able to go to sleep. What happened in this country, and it didn't just happen in one place, it wasn't just Oldham, it happened in towns and cities all over the United Kingdom on an industrial scale. And yet, mainstream media did their best not to cover it. Keir Starmer, it would appear, when he had the big job as Director of Public Prosecutions in 2008.
As the interview progressed, Farage's relentless and logical argument left the host completely speechless. He was a machine as he continually pointed out the issues the surging numbers of immigrants posed to the UK.
Yep, I was there at the KSI fight at the O2 on Saturday. Absolutely mega. Now, I did, when interviewed, say this.
You and Boris Johnson?
Oh, I do. I could deal with him. Boris, if you're listening now, let's do it. All right, was that heat of the moment? Or, Boris, are you up for it?
Farage pointed out how the increasing number of immigrants shows a failed border policy, an increase in public anxiety, difficulty in getting jobs, and an increase in the UK's housing challenges. His remakes about rising criminality among young male migrants sparked an immediate controversy. While his critics accuse him of stoking division and unfailingly stigmatising a group, Farage insists he is addressing a reality that many are afraid to talk about. Although data on migrants' involvement in crime are often contentious, Farage insisted that poor integration and struggle for employment often enhance the chances of this situation becoming a reality. While his arguments may increase call for broader reform on border policy, it risks deepening social tensions. The Reform leader makes it clear that deportation must be the cornerstone of any effective immigration strategy. He calls it the only deterrent that works, but acknowledges the broad challenges such as logistics, legal hurdles, and the ever-present spectre of human rights debate. On the other hand, his critics argue that deportation alone won't solve the problem. Instead, they advocate for a mix of faster asylum processes, better integration efforts, and global partnerships to fix the deepest causes of migration.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I agree with the Home Secretary. She's right to highlight that 2023 was a year of shame for a government that had repeatedly promised net migration of tens of thousands a year, not nearly a million. Perhaps they'll never be forgiven for it. But if I also look at 2023, I see that asylum claims were 84,000 people. Everyone talks about the small boats, and yet 69% of that 84,000 did not come across the English Channel in boats. Can she tell me, please, where did they come from? Were they overstayers?
Farage's focus on deportation inadvertently raises moral and ethical questions, especially vulnerable migrants escaping dire circumstances. The European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR, is another target in Farage's crosshairs. He argues that this international framework ties the UK's hands, undermining its sovereignty and making meaningful reform impossible. While his statements so far have raised the intensity of the discussion, his criticism of the Tories was particularly painful. They talk tough on migration, but consistently fail to take action against the convection constraints.
Labour's on 36%. Now, I'm no good at maths, but I think if you add 16 and 20, you get 36. So what you're doing is killing the Tory party by removing their support. If you withdraw all of your candidates now, there could be a hung parliament, and you might get some of this through.
Number one, they destroyed themselves. If I got to the Bahamas and fished for a month, they still would have lost this election very, very heavily. You'll find many of our supporters, if we weren't here, wouldn't bother to vote for anybody at all. A lot of our voters have never voted before in their lives.
While leaving the ECHR will be a political move with far-reaching consequences, Farage sees it as a necessary step to restore control of immigration and the legal process.
Is the idea that they're not given amnesty and they decide eventually to leave on their own volition?
You cannot give them amnesty. You cannot give them amnesty. To do that is an insult to those who want to come legally and pay their money and get passports and swear oaths.
So we don't do anything about them? We just let them
I
be.
didn't suggest that for a moment. So you cannot give them an amnesty, and yes, we must be deporting people who come illegally, especially those who committed crimes or who refuse, point blank refuse, to integrate in our communities. Not an easy job. Long-term job. Will take a long time.
How do we know whether they're point blank refusing to integrate? What would that look like?
Well, if you've been here 10 years and can't speak a word of English, you might not have tried very hard.
So if someone...
It's an example.
His take is a classy populist at its core. Brash and unapologetic, and willing to challenge the elites of British politics. Whether you see him as a beacon of truth or as a provocateur, one thing is certain. His criticism keeps the light burning on the immigration debate brighter. Overall, Farage's stands on immigration, his sharp criticism of both Labour and the Conservatives, and the fingers he pointed at the ECHR are the tough love Britain needs to get the handle on immigration. Do you think he is right, or is it a step too far in a deeply divided country?
What the British people are owed is an explanation. Because a failure on this scale isn't just bad luck, it isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. No, this is a different order of failure. This happened by design, not accident. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders.
Above all, Starmer is also under pressure to reduce legal migration as he tries to fend off growing support for arch-Eurosceptic Farage's Hard Right Reform UK, which won roughly 4 million votes during the July 4 poll, an unprecedented haul for a far-right party. Do you think Nigel Farage's criticism of the immigration laws was good? Do you think the UK should amend the immigration laws? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.